Let's be clear about just what hardwired means. After all, there aren't really any wires in the brain. There are nerves that look a bit like wires. Indeed, they carry electrical signals through the body, just like the wires in a plug. But that's not really what we mean in evolutionary terms when we talk about hardwired. In evolutionary contexts, what we mean is that some things are fixed and immovable. They're hardwired insofar as they can't be changed. When we talk about physical attributes, this is easy to understand. For example, the colour of an individual's eyes is hardwired. It's the result of their particular genetic makeup. So is the ability to wiggle your ears, or not. These are genetically determined and not about to change whether we like it or not. It's important to be clear about what we've just said. Physical attributes such as these are not negotiable. They're hardwired. There's another name for this. It's called determinism. Determinism means that the individual has no control over these particular attributes. They are as they are, and that's all there is to it. Short of modern innovations such as cosmetic surgery, we all look the way we do because our genes determined our appearance without any reference to our preferences or desires. That's why most people have 2 legs, 2 arms, 4 fingers and an opposable thumb on each hand, spines that are notoriously vulnerable to injury and chronic pain, and extremely badly designed eyes. The optic nerve passes through the middle of the retina, creating an unnecessary blind spot. Nor can we change the fact that our sinuses are perfectly adapted for drainage in our quadruped ancestors, but extremely inefficient in bipedal humans, as anyone with a head cold like me at the moment can attest. We didn't choose these things. They evolved that way, and we're stuck with them. That's determinism. That's all very well, and nobody would dispute the fact that we can't control the basically evolved structure of our eyes, however poor that structure may be. But what if we couldn't control our basic behaviours either? For a lot of people, that might be rather harder to accept. In evolutionary psychology, the idea is that our mental modules are just as determined, just as beyond our control, as our physical attributes are. We are what we are, both physically and mentally, because our ancestors evolved that way. Some evolutionary psychologists go so far as to suggest that free will is an illusion, an evolved myth, an evolutionary contrick that lets us believe we're in charge when really nothing could be farther from the truth. Others aren't so rigid. They talk about the default settings that spring from our evolutionary makeup, but also include into their theories the possibility that we can overcome those predetermined character traits. In other words, that we retain a degree of free will, even though the cards may well be stacked against us from the outset. In large part, this series will explore these 2 notions and in the process go some way toward deciding whether or not our free will is an illusion. But we'll also go further. We'll examine those aspects of human psychology that seem to be universal, on the assumption that they evolved in our species and other species in exactly the same way that other characteristics evolved, and by the same basic mechanism. Natural selection. Let's look at another example. Creationists often object to evolution theory on the grounds that, based as it is upon natural selection and survival of the fittest, it cannot account for widespread traits such as altruism. However, that's just not true. It can and it does. In 1981, Anatole Rapoport won a competition. It was a simple contest. The various contestants had to design a computer program that would survive in a sort of electronic evolutionary environment. His program, which he called Tit for Tat, was simple and effective. In short, it consisted of just 4 rules to apply to cooperative relationships with other programs. 1. Never be the first to defect. Defecting means cheating to you and me. 2. Retaliate only after your partner has defected. 3. Be prepared to forgive after carrying out just one act of retaliation. And 4. Adopt this strategy only if the probability of meeting the same player again exceeds 2 out of 3. The program beat all other programs, including the selfish, opportunist, exploitative ones, and it did so with ease. The reason for its radical success was that the rules it operated by meant that it rewarded cooperation and kindness from other programs whilst punishing transgressors by withdrawing cooperation and kindness. In other words, the altruistic program rewarded altruistic others. Crucially, the tit-for-tat program didn't know anything about altruism. It was merely following rules about being nice to everyone unless they were unkind to it. We can see how a genetic mental module that inclines us to be nice to others, so long as we expect to see them again, would thrive in the evolutionary environment, where people presumably knew each other in these tiny communities for their entire lives. We can also see how little they would need to understand about the higher philosophy of altruism and cooperation. They just did nice things because their genes drove them to, in the same way that people like sugars and fats because the genes for those preferences gave their ancestors an advantage when food was scarce. There's no need to understand it or even be conscious of it. Just doing it is enough. This unconscious trait, this tendency to act in certain ways in particular situations, is what we mean by a mental module. It's a genetically predetermined characteristic that responds to circumstance in predictable, predetermined ways. Take that, free will.